Miguel, this Club World Cup kicks off this weekend. Are you engaged with it yet?
A little bit. It's beginning to grow because I suppose, like any modern tournament now, like even with a World Cup, it doesn't quite feel we get the 6-month build-up anymore.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't a World Cup, it's the Club World Cup. But now we're beginning to see a lot more about it. And obviously I think most of the discussion has been on the very relevant and potentially extremely influential politics around it, particularly as regards how the game will actually be played in the future. But also some of the intrigue of the actual football, which is there. I mean, I suppose, I'm in kind of two minds about this tournament. The motivations the motivations behind the way this version of it is implemented are highly questionable. The effect in the game is questionable. The politics are questionable. But at the same time, I still that can kind of coexist with my long-term feeling that this is actually, it's quite a good idea at core. And we shouldn't forget, although it was Gianni Infantino that very much ran with the idea, and I've never known a tournament to be so anchored to one man. The original concept was by Zvonimir Boban, who I'd say is obviously a football legend who would have the best interest of the game at heart. He came up with it because he thought A, there should be something for the global game in terms of clubs, and B, he thought they should replace what he thought was the ridiculous Confederations Cup, the traditional dress rehearsal for the World Cup. And I mean, the idea of I think there should be a good spirit to it. I mean, there's also the connected argument that the game badly needed kind of to spread some of the interest, some of the wealth from Western Europe. But that actually feeds into some of the bigger questions about this.
I think that's it, really, isn't it? The fact that it could be something that turns out to be quite good, even if it's put together for reasons that are not for the good of the game. I mean, you talked, when we were talking before we came on, Dotun, about maybe a slight comparison with the Qatar World Cup, in that it being put in European winter was for completely the wrong reasons. And of course, when Qatar was the winning bidder for hosting 2022, they're always right. We're going to have it in the normal summer months. We're going to have it in the normal summer months, and then they flip on that, and they're allowed to flip on that. But actually, even though that was done for completely the wrong reasons, it turned out to be the best World Cup in a while, because of the fact that all the players who play for the big European clubs, even if they're not European, weren't cooked, because it wasn't the end of the season. So in terms of the excitement of the football, in terms of the pace of the football, it was the best World Cup in a really long time. And obviously, we're not going to have the same thing here, Miguel, because if you look at the big European clubs, they're at the end of a long season. Some of those players, I'm thinking of players like Julian Alvarez, Lautaro Martinez, they're not quite finishing another very long season after a very, very long season that came the year before. In fact, those guys are never getting time off. Well, I think we have to accept that. On the other hand, not all these teams, and you're thinking of the 4 Brazilian teams, for example, are coming in on the same schedule.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, exactly. It's not like that for the European teams. It is very much like that for the Brazilian teams who are mid-season. They're going to be almost at a physical, and I think this is key now, a psychological peak. I mean, it's funny, we're kind of speaking on the back of the international break and just hearing a lot of kind of criticism of Tuchel's England, and like in that sort of situation, and Italy getting hammered by Norway, in that sort of situation, the players have had such a long season, okay, they might obviously not going to say they don't want to be there, but you can see it.
But what do you expect?
Whereas I mean, and so for say the players that have been at Inter, they've had 59 games. They've come, I mean, you could see in the Champions League final they're exhausted. Then they go to that Norway game, and now they've got this. Whereas against that, not just are the Brazilian clubs really fresh, but they are absolutely pumped for this. I mean, the Club World Cup has always had, I think, a greater appeal in South America. That's not just because of kind of the recent the recent, obviously, kind of global hegemony of the Champions League. It's also because of the history. Because I mean, South American clubs actually there was a period when they were just much better than Europe. You know, when Brazil and Argentina kept their best players for much longer. Like I mean, 1963, Eusebio is nutmegged by Pelé, who Santos destroyed Benfica. A real kind of like moment. Well, you're the pretender, stay in your place. It's 81, Zico's Flamengo destroy Liverpool. So that's like kind of like the mystique that's been built up around this in South America, and obviously that's been kind of driven by a new dimension in the last 2 decades, which is you quickly take all our best players. This is our chance to at least kind of show some pride. And from speaking to people who do work with the Brazilian clubs, I say Brazil much more than Argentina, just because I mean, Brazil have won the last 6 Libertadores.
Well, they're far wealthier Brazilian clubs, aren't they?
Exactly.
It's another example of the economics in European football, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But like, so the Brazilian clubs feel that, right, obviously they accept there's still a quality gap to Europe. I mean, you can see it in where their players go, but they think that their desire, their freshness, and everything about this can compensate that. And I think a few of them really fancy the chances here.
Yeah, I can see all of those things coming into play here. This is really fascinating because on the one hand, the history that you mentioned, Miguel, is accurate. That we, as people listening will know, still don't take the Club World Cup as seriously as the South Americans. They really, really want it. However, Andy, I think this time around, it's different. I think that the European clubs can't decide how much they want this Club World Cup because, of course, it comes with some of the consequences that you've alluded to, which is they've still got a full season ahead. So do you prioritise the Club World Cup with all the implications, physical implications on your players, or do you hold a bit back because you've got a domestic season to compete in?
Don, that's not only a great question, it's the only question. I think, because already, I think in our minds, and we don't really know how all in the European teams, the big European teams are going to go. We are thinking, okay, well, it's not a new tournament, but it's a new format of tournament, and it's so increased in size that it might as well be a new tournament. So really, it's how much meaning you attach to it. It's how much the players are able to physically and mentally give from those big European clubs. And I guess the question is how much the clubs are cracking the whip in terms of exposure, the money they can make out of it, all those sort of things, which are the most important thing to them. But I think that's the thing. Already, without a lot of people having considered how the tournament might unroll over the next couple of weeks, there's already a sense, I think, Miguel, of Liverpool and Arsenal are in a great position for next season's Premier League, just because you talk about the mental freshness. I think that's the thing that's always overlooked. Just being there, you're still at work.
Yeah.
You're not on holiday.
That's exactly it.
You're on the other side of you're on the other side of the world doing your job.
And there's another side. I mean, Tuchel mentioned that point the other day. Exactly that Arsenal and Liverpool have an advantage, and there is another side to that because, like, in a world now where. I mean, look, the calendar has been the theme of the season. There's an argument, say, that Liverpool won the league because they, unlike everyone else, they got their science right and managed to keep their best players on the pitch. There's an argument that Paris Saint-Germain won the Champions League because the French league is so forgiving for them. So the calendar and preparation has become so key. And suddenly now you've got numerous big European clubs who have to kind of do something that's never been done before and kind of prepare their entire squad for this kind of midsummer tournament. Do they treat this as pre-season? Do they have pre-season or kind of a version of pre-season later? It does kind of scramble things. But as you say, I mean, Dotun used the words there, all in. Because it's funny, I used those words myself in the piece where the ownership class are all in. So like Florentino Perez, he's got visions in his mind of like this completes his historical legacy. I mean, his great predecessor, who the Madrid stadium is named after, Santiago Bernabeu. He was like a former player, manager, and then president, who was the president when they won the first European Cup, to the first ever European Championships. It obviously fits Perez's personal legacy and what he would see as the grandeur of Madrid to become the first true world champions. And hence, that's why he was adamant in Xabi Alonso coming before this tournament, even though he gets only 3 full training sessions with his full squad. So, like, I mean, and it's similar actually, given some of what Pep Guardiola said, where, I mean, there was a comment that Guardiola came out a few months ago where he's talking about like players playing golf and all this, as if he's going to treat this as a bit of a low-key thing. Well, City's owners, I mean, like I wrote myself the other day again that when there was a meeting about this among the big European clubs and FIFA and broadcasters back in August or so. Ferran Soriano was talking about how they're going to kind of they're going to take it so seriously. They're going to exactly this kind of recalibrate their conditioning system so it'll be at a peak for this tournament. And it's an interesting given how City's season went. But yeah, so
how Real Madrid's season has gone as well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, obviously, say the ownerships. I mean, this is the other side to all this. It's not just about the kind of the potential prize money where European winners, and like this is another issue. There's kind of the regulations allow for kind of different gradients here, but the European winners could get up to $90 million. That's obviously attractive to the club. I mean, that's essentially a player in PSR. Whereas, if and obviously every single one of these clubs, they want to kind of push their brand in what is seen as the football's new frontier. It's taken off in America, burgeoning market. They all want. It's almost got a first mover advantage there and a land grab. And then, if you're, say, the owners of City or Paris Saint-Germain, who are Abu Dhabi and Qatar, I mean, this is about global projection for them.
That's exactly it. And I think that's where, I guess, there's the divide between club and team. Because even though the players may be begging for a break, the club, if you think of Real Madrid, they'll think of it as the one global title that in this format we haven't won. And they'll feel that they have to be there and they have to be competitive about it, because for the same reason that they feel in the club, and they've never been shy about saying it, that the Champions League is bigger than La Liga for them, because what gives them their power is they're a global club. Now, to a lesser extent, Porto and Benfica will feel that as well, that they have become huge clubs because they have dominated Europe. So obviously with Benfica, that goes back to the 60s. With Porto, it goes all through the Pinto da Costa era. So we can talk about 87 against Bayern Munich, or 2004 with Jose Mourinho against Monaco.
I mean, and that Benfica Porto point is so interesting, because I know we're going to touch this on the Q&A that's coming out tomorrow, particularly as regards one of the questions. But at the moment, we're in a situation in football where a lot of domestic leagues, they're kind of openly talking about how they're fearing for the futures, and they think a lot of the clubs can't be sustainable, and it's because of what is happening at the top end of the game. And it's another reason I think this tournament could be very significant, because it could be it could be seen as a kind of watershed in a move towards fully globalised football.
Yeah,
where kind of suddenly a lot of these clubs, a lot of these big clubs, huge supports, are suddenly playing more competitive fixtures outside traditional territories.
Yeah, I can see that.
I'm looking at the mini transfer window that has emerged, and we've seen some of those top teams we've already talked about, Man City, for example, and Real Madrid, strengthening themselves over the last few weeks, and the likes of Dortmund as well in the mix, amongst other things. I wonder whether that mini transfer window, Andy, doesn't tip the balance more in favour, because now the great thing that I'm looking forward to from this weekend is that there'll be more or less a level playing field for all the reasons that we've mentioned.
Yes.
And now you've got this added thing of the European teams being able to strengthen themselves over the last few weeks. Does that not tip the balance more in their favour?
Maybe. I mean, you could argue that there's some sort of mental freshness in that, a new start with a new club, but these guys have all come off big seasons. You look at the amount of games that Tijani Reinders has played, that Ryan Shirky has played. I think
Ait Nouri as well.
Yeah, I think, but if we're talking about at the absolutely highest level, I think we're talking about Reinders and Shirky, and they played European football as well. You're looking at guys who've played well over 50 games this season. So I mean, I think the City are in a particularly interesting spot because they've had this already too, and it obviously we've got a proper transfer window to come. It'll be a 3-stage rebuild, I suppose, in what they're doing. They're obviously trying to get younger. They're trying to get more athletic. This, for me, however it goes for City, makes it a sort of soft launch for next season, to see what they're able to do next season. Are they able to dominate the Premier League again? Because it's such a profound change that because it's happening in these different stages, perhaps we're not noticing just how much they are changing and how much that 11 might change. But again, like you were saying, Miguel, with City and PSG, PSG is different because they've just won the Champions League and they've absolutely dazzled the world with their football. But with City, even though they did get the Champions League a couple of years back, you would never say that Manchester City are truly global on the same sort of scale as Real Madrid or I don't know, even Manchester United, who obviously aren't involved in this. They are not quite in that top bracket of elite, hit hard in all territories sort of clubs. I think this is actually pretty big for Manchester City.
Yeah. I mean, I think that ties into another element about this tournament, which is even if people don't see it as a big thing now, and even if this doesn't work this year, and I think there's obviously all sorts of concerns about attendances, about viewing figures, and all that. If it's got the money to keep going, which we expect it does, given some of the politics here and how
sure.
and Infantino, and like essentially how kind of the DAZN deal has propelled it, and then it's got a sponsorship with like PIF in Saudi Arabia, but once it happens, a mythology starts to be created. And even if kind of people of my age group don't really care about it, kids watching it, suddenly in 10, 15 years, they're remembering kind of the first Club World Cup. And even in a world where kind of football structure is so established, and like we've had 70 years the European Cup, almost a century the World Cup, it doesn't take that much, actually. It doesn't take that long for a tournament to suddenly... I mean, even the Euro is actually in its true form. It's only gone since the 1980s.
Exactly. I mean, it's hard to say what meaning we can attach to it when it hasn't started in this format. I think the lack of anticipation for it in, like, I guess, a world fans community at the moment really is reflective of the time... of the fact that we have no time to breathe in the schedule. There is, as Miguel says, no run up to it. So no one's been able to think of it. I think there are a lot of people who are like, oh, wow, it started at the weekend. And then once you get a couple of games in, and if you get a couple of good games, it'll change.
It's got to deliver, hasn't it? And it feels like, from what we've been talking about, it's got all the possibilities, despite all the other issues, of delivering quality football. We look forward to that.